Ocarina of Time was the first game that would see Nintendo's iconic Link brought to life in 3D. The game has become a classic in the all-time gaming Hall of Fame. Our story begins in late 1994. During this period, Nintendo was also developing Super Mario 64. They presented the game at the 1995 Nintendo Space World. The footage that was revealed of Ocarina of Time looked entirely different from the game that finally shipped. One of the biggest changes in direction for Nintendo was the decision to release the game as a cartridge rather than the planned Nintendo 64 DD. Upon release, Nintendo confirmed that in terms of megabytes, the game was the largest game to ever to release on a Nintendo console.
Yo, listen up. We will not live in a two-dimensional world.
We won't go in one direction
or seek where we can say.
We will walk through walls. We will take a look around us.
We will not be confined.
We believe in the path of least limits.
We won't be told how to view the world.
We will experience true freedom.
We will not compromise. We will live the game through our hands.
We will be in control of something. We will change the system.
Super Mario 64 would be the last game that Miyamoto directed. He gave the job of directing Ocarina of Time to various members of the team, each of them focusing on a different part of the game. All of the directors would go on to become prominent figures at Nintendo. Aonuma and Yoshiaki would both become key in developing both the Zelda and Mario franchises. Soon the approach to assign multiple directors would cause chaos among the team. This would force Miyamoto to step in and get the project back on track. Miyamoto's passion for creating a fantastic game was unparalleled in the industry, and his role as producer gave him the ability to send the series in new and interesting directions, while giving younger team members the chance to grow. Initially, the game was then simply known as Zelda 64, and it wouldn't be until much later that the launch title would be finalized. Early on, the development team were asked to write down on a piece of paper what they wanted to achieve with a 3D game. The slips of paper were then stuck to the wall. The game directors then went through each idea and considered whether it fitted the overall vision for the game. They were drawn to truly original ideas that would push the development team to create a game that no one had ever played before. One of the primary goals that the developers had was smoothly translating the sword combat from previous games into a 3D world using lock-on targeting. One of the advantages that Ocarina of Time had was that many of the development team had already worked on Super Mario and Star Fox 64 and were able to bring the lessons they had learned from those games to the project. Early on, Miyamoto had suggested that Ocarina of Time could be in first person, stating that it would allow the player a greater sense of immersion when traveling through Hyrule. In the end, the idea was dropped as one of the key elements of the story revolved around the change from a child to an adult. It was felt that this aspect of the game would be lost if played in first person. With 3D being a brand new technology for most developers, they found themselves having to solve problems with gameplay. One new challenge would center around the player's ability to coordinate their attacks. In 2D, it was much easier for Link to run at an enemy and simply strike them with his sword. The developers found that this approach did not translate well into 3D, with a gameplay experience that left a lot to be desired. To remedy this issue, they agreed upon a targeting system that would allow the player to lock onto an enemy and circle them as they focused on attack and defense. Another challenge that arose was the use of polygons to create the walls of the dungeons. Many of Link's new moves would cause him to clip through the walls of the dungeon. The development team found themselves having to redo whole dungeons anytime the designers changed one of Link's moves.
It's got 3 handles, so you can either hold it like that in the normal way, or like this using the D-pad and the thumbstick, or, as I'm doing in this Mario game, like this. And there are buttons everywhere, on the top, at the sides, and even underneath. Right, here goes. Wish me luck. So here it is, Super Mario 64. And yes, you are watching the game screen. Amazingly, this is not a rendered graphics demo. It's what you get when you play the game. The images are detailed, smooth, and easily superior to anything currently available. What's even more astounding is that Super Mario 64 is a genuine three-dimensional platformer, because you can take the little plumber just about anywhere you want to go within this graphic world.
Early on in development, the team knew that they wanted to incorporate magic of some sort. They decided to do this through the ocarina. By playing a song that Link has learned, the player can cause one of many things to happen, including changing the weather, talking to people far away, or causing the sun's light to appear in dark dungeons. Miyamoto wanted to make sure that when players enter Hyrule Field for the first time, that they will be blown away. He proposed a huge landscape with an epic musical score. Aonuma has stated that Link's entrance to Hyrule Field is his favorite part of the game. Designer Makoto Miyanaga has stated that in the beginning Hyrule Field was terribly uninteresting. There was barely anything to do in Hyrule Field. Eventually, it was decided to add things such as wind, temperature, and atmosphere. The changing time of day is also apparent in Hyrule Field more so than any other location. Getting the sun to rise, then set, followed by the moon, was a challenge for the developers, as was getting the correct color tones. The Nintendo 64 was capable of producing fog, so they took advantage of it, though Miyanaga stated that they didn't want to overuse it, so they had an appropriate amount of fog during the different times of the day, with the morning having the most. As the day progressed, they altered the thickness of the fog. Ocarina of Time's music was written by Kondo, the composer in charge of music for most of the games in the Legend of Zelda series. In addition to characters having musical themes, areas of Hyrule are also associated with pieces of music. Kondo said that creating distinct themes on the limited scale was a major challenge, but feels that the result is very natural. The popularity of Ocarina of Time led to a global increase in ocarina sales. Next Generation wrote that Nintendo absolutely can't afford another holiday season without a real marquee title, and that Zelda was one of the most anticipated games of the decade, upon which the Nintendo 64's fate depended. Nintendo spent $10 million on Ocarina of Time's marketing. Several versions of Ocarina of Time were produced, with later revisions featuring minor changes such as glitch repairs, the recoloring of Ganondorf's blood from red to green, and the alteration of the music heard in the Fire Temple dungeon to remove a sample of an Islamic prayer chant. Upon its release, Ocarina of Time received critical acclaim. It garnered perfect review scores from the majority of gaming publications. The review aggregator websites Metacritic and Game Rankings both rank the original Nintendo 64 version as the highest reviewed game of all time, with average scores of 99 from Metacritic and 98% from Game Rankings. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Also check out our Patreon for more content.